Welcome to this episode of the Neurocrush Immersion. In this episode, we're going to talk about preparing the brain and mind for leadership. This is a talk I've given in various settings, and I thought it would make an interesting subject for our podcast. Have you asked yourself, what is it about the brain and mind that helps someone be a leader? Obviously, everyone is not a leader. Some people demonstrate leadership qualities very young. Some others seem to acquire and demonstrate them as they go along later in life. And some don't ever at all demonstrate those qualities. So what underlies leadership when it comes to the brain and mind? And that's what we're going to discuss over the next 20 minutes. The first thing that I'd like to draw your attention to is the Howard Gardner concept of multiple intelligences. Being a leader means that you embrace what you do with aplomb. And for this, it's not just about how smart you are, it's how you're smart. And obviously, each one of us is different in the way that we are smart. Howard Gardner divided intelligences into different categories. He said, it's not one thing for you to be intelligent or not. It is how you're intelligent. Some of us are intelligent in a naturalistic way. We understand nature and organic processes well. Some of us are intelligent in a spatial way. We are able to see and map the world in 3D. Some of us have musical intelligence. We have the capacity to recognize, create, reproduce, and reflect on music. Some of us are very good at logical reasoning. We are skilled at deductive reasoning, in detecting patterns, and in logical thinking. Some of us have very good interpersonal skills. We communicate and with people well, we read them well. Some of us have bodily kinesthetic abilities. We use our body in highly differentiated and skilled ways. Some of us are linguistic in our abilities. We master and speak the language, or we write extremely well. It could be one language, it could be multiple languages. And some of us have excellent intrapersonal intelligence. We understand ourselves well, we understand our feelings, and we understand what we want. All people have 2 or 3 of these types of intelligences, and this determines the kind of work that they do best. This may also determine in what form their leadership would be best. Most people automatically veer towards fields where they have high intelligences. And sometimes we make mistakes. We make a misstep, we go in a particular direction which is not appropriate for us. But if we keep our minds open, we can actually course correct and we can find that area of work that suits us best. The local culture has a role to play in this also. Most of us become competent in something when the intelligence is given opportunities to develop in that local culture. Society also has a role to play. When it recognizes the person's competence with awards and recognition, the person's intelligence further develops to the next level of mastery. These multiple intelligences make people go towards particular careers. So if we go back to the cycle of intelligence we were talking about, people with a naturalistic intelligence would end up doing well as biologists or conservationists. People with linguistic intelligence as poets and writers. People with visuospatial intelligence as designers or engineers. People with musical intelligence as singers, musicians, composers. People with interpersonal intelligence, the ability to organize people, group activities, and social relationships as leaders and social workers. People with intrapersonal intelligence, the ability to understand themselves as philosophers or clergy. People with logical intelligence, who excel in math and logical thinking as bankers and accountants. People with kinesthetic or movement intelligence as actors, athletes, and people who dance, and so on. One important leadership lesson, therefore, is to understand your intelligences and to play to them. Your intelligences are your weapons. Go to war with them, not against them. And whatever field you choose of activity, please be aware that when you play to your intelligences, you're much more likely to be successful. Howard Gardner is a famous Harvard psychologist, and apart from multiple intelligences, he has written a lot about various other things as well concerning people and leadership. One of his books is 5 Minds for the Future, and that is what I am describing in this segment of the podcast. He describes 5 minds that are necessary for leadership. He calls the first mind the disciplined mind, one that is acquired through years spent in scholarship, a craft, or a profession, which he estimates takes most people a decade to master. The disciplined mind, he says, emerges from consistent work done to develop skill sets and a knowledge base, and it necessitates both education and or training. This is what we do when we go to university, when we pursue a master's. What we are doing is we are developing a disciplined mind. Then he describes the synthesizing mind, learning to integrate disparate sources of information and identifying the links between them, identifying the jobs that need to be done and the people available to do those jobs, identifying priorities and the way forward, balancing past visions with future aspirations, and being able to examine new ideas in the light of one's knowledge base. And if you think about it, as you progress through graduation, through your masters, to work, this is what you start doing. You start applying the knowledge base that you have acquired until that point in time. You start recognizing patterns. You start recognizing or identifying opportunities. Now ask yourself, have you reached that stage in your development where quite automatically your knowledge base is useful to you in order to synthesize information? And that is your synthesizing mind working. Howard Gardner goes on to describe the creating mind. He points out that it's more the function of a leader than of a manager. It is the ability to innovate and think out of the box. It is the ability to develop compelling narratives which then get embodied in the leader's life. And if you think about it, Cicero, for example, said, "Nothing convinces like conviction." Leaders are convinced very often about what they are doing, and the conviction is what attracts people towards them, very often in large numbers, and those people then become part of their journey. This is true of entrepreneurs, this is true of political leaders, it is true of social leaders, it's true of many different kinds of people. So developing that compelling narrative which becomes embodied in the person's life becomes so important. Leaders with a creating mind are also able to bring about changes both by persuasion and by personal example. And what characterizes the creating mind of the leader, therefore, is out-of-the-box, big bang thinking combined with a passion for the cause, determination, and dedication. And it's this powerful combination that leads to new ventures coming up and being created, new things happening which people never imagined were possible. Think about the electric car revolution that we have today, for example. Kind of started with Tesla. It kind of started with Elon Musk's ability to think completely out of the box. And that is the creating mind of the leader. Howard Gardner goes on to describe 2 other minds. These are ideal. They probably are essential too. But we'll go on to ask in the podcast, are they really a requirement for leadership? The fourth mind, which he talks about, is the respectful mind. The ability to avoid stereotyping, the ability to accept people for who and what they are, to empathize and make common cause with them, and to be worthy of their trust. Empathy is among the most important qualities in leadership. It links well with an important form of intelligence that has gained credence today as a measure of success. Yes, I'm talking about emotional intelligence. And your EQ, your emotional quotient, is what is driven very often by your ability to empathize. So the respectful mind calls upon you to work with people around you respectfully. Howard Gardner goes on to describe the ethical mind, one that understands well its role as a worker and a citizen, one who belongs to a region, nation, and a planet, a mind that understands duties and obligations, is able to perceive its role through the eyes of others, a mind that has a clear concept of the world it would like to inhabit and of its responsibility in developing such a world. And quite honestly, any enterprise, however well conceived, but lacking in ethical values, is doomed to fail, is the point that Howard Gardner makes. What we do learn, therefore, is that empathy, and to a very large extent altruism, which is the one of the key predictors of human happiness, are very important human qualities. But in the next segment of this podcast, I'm going to ask the difficult question: do they really constitute leadership skills as we are led to believe in popular culture? Are leaders truly always empathetic and altruistic and respectful people? Or are there other kinds of leaders who do not necessarily possess those qualities but are successful nevertheless? Elon Musk fired 80% of Twitter, and Silicon Valley companies went on to adopt the same practice, was a report that came out in Mint some months ago. We all remember Elon Musk's acquisition of Twitter. We all remember how overnight many people lost their jobs. Several people were asked to go home, and they really had no notice that this was going to happen. The important thing here was the decisiveness that he brought to the table, very interestingly. But what was also important there as an observation is that he did not really spend time empathizing with his employees, his new employees of the company he had acquired. He was more concerned about how to make the company work better in the way he thought was best. This brings to our mind the question: are leaders always respectful and ethical? This takes me to another leader who wasn't necessarily either respectful or ethical, but was one of the creative geniuses of our time and made some of the greatest changes to the industry he worked in. I'm talking about Steve Jobs. If you read his biography by Walter Isaacson, there are many examples of how Steve Jobs was quite different and well known for what was called his reality distortion. Here are a few quotes. Steve has a reality distortion field. In his presence, reality is malleable. He can convince anyone of practically anything. It wears off when he's not around, but it makes it hard to have realistic schedules. Here's another. A confounding melange of charismatic rhetorical style, indomitable will, and eagerness to bend any fact to fit the purpose at hand. Here's a third. It came from willfully defying reality, not only to others but to himself. He can deceive himself. Here's another. He reminded me of Rasputin. He laser beamed in on you and didn't blink. It did not matter if he was serving a strange purple juice. You drank it. And here's one more. Sometimes he would throw you off balance by suddenly adopting your position as his own without acknowledging that he ever thought differently. Now, when you listen to all this and you read the biography, it becomes clear that Steve Jobs was a certain kind of leader, perhaps quite similar to Elon Musk. These leaders operate in a world of reality that they make their own. And this concept of reality distortion, where they can manipulate facts to suit their ends, to suit their current thinking process, is what the author is talking about. Now, one thing that people like Elon Musk and Steve Jobs share are what we call psychopathic qualities. And I take you back to my podcast, The Godfather Paradox, which looks at psychopathic qualities in far greater detail, and I invite you to go back and listen to that episode of the Neurokrish Immersion. But here I'm going to quote the book The Wisdom of Psychopaths by Kevin Dutton. Kevin Dutton points out that psychopaths zero in on weaknesses. Ted Bundy, the serial killer, picked out his victims from the way they walked. Psychopaths are very often ice cool under pressure. Multiple experiments have shown that people with these traits are not nervous when they are under pressure. They do not feel emotions the way other people do. They also balance an aptitude for predatory violence with enhanced empathy, the ability to get under the skin of their victims. When we talk about empathy, we are talking about the ability to understand and make common cause with people, to put yourself in their shoes. How is the psychopath different? He is able to put himself in your shoes, but that's not to make common cause with you. That is to exploit your weakness. And that is the fundamental difference of between a psychopath and empath. Now, in Kevin Dutton's book, he puts forward various moral dilemma questions. Now, here are two experiments he talks about. The first one, a railway trolley is hurtling down a track. In its path are 5 people who are trapped on the line and cannot escape. Fortunately, you are in a position to flip a switch that will divert the trolley down a fork in the track away from the 5 people. But there is a price. There is another person trapped down the fork, and the trolley will kill that person instead. So what will you do? Will you stay quiet and allow 5 people to be killed? Or will you flip that switch and deliberately allow 1 person to be killed? This is one dilemma that he poses in front of us. Now, ask yourself that question and try and think about what you will do. Now, here's another dilemma. As before, the railway trolley is speeding out of control towards 5 people. But this time, you are standing behind a very large stranger on a footbridge above the tracks. The only way to save the 5 people is to heave the stranger over. He will fall to a certain death, but his considerable girth will block the trolley and save those 5 lives. Will you do it? Should you push him? So you have 2 types of dilemmas. One in which all you have to do is flip a switch. You will save 5 lives, but someone will sadly die. The other in which you are an active participant. You're going to heave a huge guy over the footbridge onto the tracks so that the trolley stops and 5 lives are saved. Now, when we are confronted, most of us are confronted with this type of question, our brain, and we are put into a scan when this question is asked to us, and we are talking about dynamic PET scans. When the dilemma crosses from what is impersonal, flipping the switch, to personal, heaving a person over, your emotional brain lights up like a pinball machine. What's interesting, research shows that in psychopaths, there is radio silence. There is no change in the brain when they make the decision to heave a stranger onto the track so that 5 people don't die and the trolley is stopped. So there is a biological basis for this psychopathic trait or tendency that people have. Now, there are many other examples that the book quotes. It quotes the example of the moon landing. Neil Armstrong was reportedly cool as cucumber and barely broke a sweat. And when the data was reassessed, this was the time that he stepped out from the Apollo lander to the moon, his heart rate fell rather than rose at the time of landing. Another study by Stanley Rachman, it was from Harvard in the 1980s, looked at bomb disposal operatives. It identified those who had been in the profession for over 10 years and divided them into decorated, they'd been recognized for their work, and non-decorated group. Both groups had stable heart rates while they were working. But in the decorated group, the heart rate actually went down, so much so that the person appeared to assume a cold, meditative focus. In another study, Bode and Fritzen compared business managers, psychiatric patients, and hospitalized criminals. Superficial charm, egocentricity, persuasiveness, a lack of empathy, independence, and focus. All these were greater in the business leader group. In the criminal group, law-breaking, impulsivity, and the physical aggression dials were cranked up. What they concluded was both groups, business leaders and criminals, occupy a neuropsychological continuum. And one group, the business leader, is far more functional than the other group, the criminal, who tends to be impulsive and law-breaking and hence gets himself into trouble. What we do learn from all this, these studies, we also learn from reading the biographies of Elon Musk and Steve Jobs, is that the capacity to make hard decisions, however hurtful they may be, seems to define leadership. Empathy is an important leadership quality, but can misplaced empathy be a leadership killer? If you bought Twitter and you kept all those employees rather than firing them, would Twitter have survived, no matter how much money you have? That is the question that we have to ask ourselves. And I now take you to another wonderful book, Good to Great, by Jim Collins, a professor of management. And in this, there are several interesting chapters. I'm going to focus on the chapter called The Stockdale Paradox. Jim Collins says, every good to great company faced significant adversity along the way to greatness of one sort or another. In every case, the management team responded with a powerful psychological duality. On the one hand, they stoically accepted the brutal facts of reality. On the other hand, they maintained an unwavering faith in the end game and a commitment to prevail as a great company despite the brutal facts. And we came to call this duality the Stockdale Paradox, he says. He then goes on to talk about Admiral Jim Stockdale, whom he goes and meets and is beautifully described in the book. So Admiral Stockdale was the highest-ranking United States military officer in the Hanoi Hilton prisoner of war camp during the height of the Vietnam War. Tortured over 20 times during his 8-year imprisonment from 1965 to 1973, Stockdale lived out the war without any prisoner's rights, no set release date, and no certainty as to whether he would even survive to see his family again. Stockdale survived by organizing the prisoners into a communicating group. They developed their own sound language using spoons tapped against prison bars to communicate with each other. So when he was asked who made it from the camp and who did not make it, he said the people who didn't make it were the optimists. They were the ones who said, we are going to be out by Christmas. And then, of course, Christmas would come and Christmas would go. Then they'd say, we're going to be out by Easter. And Easter would come and Easter would go. And then Thanksgiving. And then it would be Christmas again. And they died of a broken heart. What Stockdale said was it was blind optimism that killed these people. The very important lesson, he said, is you must not confuse faith that you will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they might be. Stockdale talks about faith, discipline, and resilience as ways to overcome adversity. And these, of course, are the true marks of leadership. Rational optimism, faith that one will prevail, and the resilience to fight against all odds, to play the long game. These qualities define the leader. So if you're aspiring to be a leader, what can you do? As we end this podcast, I'm going to give you a few suggestions that you can work on. Develop your 5 minds. Your disciplined, synthesizing, creative, respectful, and ethical mind. They will serve you well. Learn to balance your empathy with cold, hard logic. Learn from Steve Jobs. Learn from Elon Musk. Develop your Arctic neurology. Balance your brutal truths with rational optimism. Build resilience and retain the faith that you will prevail. What I have done is gathered a posy of other men's flowers, and as Montaigne said, nothing but the thread that binds them is my own. I hope you found this podcast instructive. Do like and share it. We are on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube, and you'll find a whole series of similarly informative podcasts if you check out the NeuroCrush Immersion. Thank you for listening.